For 3,000 years, Earth had been nothing more than a name lost in whispers and sorrow. The stories told among the scattered remnants of humanity were always the same. A bright world, once full of life and hope, was taken in a single wave of destruction. The fall, they called it, not a war, but an erasure. Alien empires, bound by fear of what humanity was becoming, joined together in silence. Without warning, their weapons fell like judgment from the skies. Oceans boiled, cities vanished, and the sky turned red. Those who survived didn't stay. They ran, aboard broken ships and forgotten stations, escaping into the dark between stars. They were not soldiers or rulers anymore, just survivors. Generations passed. Humanity became myths, told in dim corners of alien spaceports. The children of Exile were born on metal decks, under artificial lights, hearing stories about trees, rain, and skies that weren't made of steel. Most had never even seen a planet. But the dream of Earth remained. Some called it hope. Others, a curse. Aboard one of the largest Ark ships, the Halcyon Wraith, Captain Aval Juno stood in silence inside the archive chamber, her eyes fixed on a flickering signal, old, corrupted, but real. It came from the Sol system, from Earth. The data fragment was weak, buried in layers of encrypted noise. It had been hidden in a Dominion network relay, a routine scan meant only to search for salvage. But what it revealed shattered everything. They believed Earth was not destroyed. It lived, not free, not human, but alive. Alien structures circled its orbit like chains. Green and blue still bloomed across the continents, but they were reshaped, marked by foreign hands. What broke Juno's heart and ignited her fury was the monument. A vast ring floating near the moon, carved in stone and steel, bearing words in nearly forgotten human scripts. Let this remind all species human ambition ends here. It was not just a warning. It was a trophy. Proof that the ones who had burned Earth wanted the galaxy to remember their victory. Juno looked into the faces of her crew descendants, of exiles, warriors born in corridors, engineers who had never walked on soil and saw the same fire in them. It was not just about reclaiming a world. It was about ending the silence. The scattered fleets of humanity had long followed their own paths, some becoming merchants, others mercenaries, a few hiding deep within asteroid belts, fearful of drawing attention. But now, Juno sent a call into the void, a signal coded with ancient human languages and symbols only their kind would understand. Earth lives, come home. Across distant systems, ships flickered to life. Old flags were pulled from hidden compartments. The last of the Earthborn, the forged clans of Titan's ghosts, the nomads of the Hollow Belt, they all listened. Some came for justice. Others came for vengeance. All came because something deep inside them had never let go. Still, Juno knew this was not a mission of blind war. They could not afford it. Humanity had spent millennia surviving, not conquering. But survival had made them clever. They had learned to live without nations or armies. They had adapted, taken apart alien machines, learned languages no human was meant to speak, and turned every corner of the galaxy into a classroom of resilience. On Wraith's Bridge, the stars stretched ahead, and for the first time in generations, they pointed home. But returning to Earth was not as simple as arriving. The Dominion still ruled Sol. The coalition of empires that destroyed Earth had left automated defense systems, deep monitoring arrays, and laws that forbid any vessel marked human from crossing into the inner systems. Violators were erased before their names were logged. Juno knew this, and yet she stood before her crew and said, "They burned our home because they feared what we could become. They thought exile would break us, but they made a mistake. They let us survive. No one cheered, No one needed to. The silence in that room was sharper than any war cry. It was the silence of people who had waited their entire lives to stop. Running. Beneath the main chamber, deep within the ship's memory banks, ancient files stirred maps of Earth before the fall. Voices of lost ancestors. Blueprints of machines older than the stars they now passed through. The Wraith began its slow turn toward Sol, joined by other ships, each one a memory turned to steel. The journey would take months, but the decision had already been made. As the stars moved behind them, and the long cold of exile stretched for, the last time, one truth echoed in every corridor of the fleet. Humanity was not returning as victims. They were returning as witnesses. And if the galaxy still believed the old lie, that human ambition ended on the day Earth fell, then they were about to learn just how wrong they had been got in the cold reaches beyond charted space, hidden behind the lightless curtain of a dying star. There was a place no map recorded, and no empire dared search Sierra 9, a forge moon built inside the broken shell of a forgotten planet. Here, deep within its hollowed crust, the last remnants of ancient human factions gathered. These were not governments or nations, they were clans shaped by hardship. The Void Engineers, masters of machines older than memory. The Ember Priests, keepers of myth and fire, who once guided souls through the stars. And the Atlas Reavers, warriors and salvagers raised in asteroid fields, where only the ruthless survived. Once scattered and secretive, they now answered the call sent by Captain Avel Juno from the Halcyon Wraith. The message had carried through the dark like a heartbeat, and though many feared what it meant, none could ignore it. Earth was alive and under alien chains. In the vast chamber known as the Furnace Core, the leaders of these clans stood around a circular platform of black glass and rusted steel. Old symbols glowed faintly under their feet, remnants of a time when humanity still dared to call itself united. At first, there was cautioned debate over resources, fear of drawing attention, arguments over old grudges and lost blood. But when Juno herself stepped forward, her voice steady and clear, the room changed. She did not beg or threaten. She reminded them of what was stolen, not just a planet, but the right to belong somewhere. She spoke of children who had never seen real sunlight, of languages forgotten, of ancestors buried among stars that had no names. Slowly, silence fell. And in that silence, unity was forged. Not with promises, but with purpose. Work began at once. Across the forge moon, machines older than the fall were reawakened. Ancient reactors were restarted with cracked hands and whispered prayers. Hidden vaults revealed weapons that had been locked away, feared even by those who built them. Among these were the void blade swords that responded to thought, humming with resonance that only human minds could wield. Alongside them, the grav cannons, weapons that bent local gravity fields to crush or lift targets as if reality itself were on command. The engineers didn't stop there. They combined human intuition with alien precision, fusing stolen Dominion tech with forgotten Earth science. The result was something entirely new: hybrids, no longer bound by the limitations of their creators. What aliens designed for control, humans turned into chaos tools, unpredictable and brilliant. And then came the AI cores. Long band under old Terran law, these artificial minds had once guided humanity's greatest cities and fleets. After the fall, they had been erased or hidden, some destroyed out of fear they might be traced. But here, on Sierra 9, fragments of them were brought back. Code recovered from asteroid ruins, data threads smuggled across decades, incomplete personalities stitched together with caution and care. One by one, they awakened. Not as rulers, but as partners, commanders shaped by millennia of exile, trained on guerrilla tactics, stealth, and survival. They remembered Earth, not as it was, but as it should be. Still, Not all were at peace with this rising storm. In the lower levels of the forge, murmurs grew among the younger reavers and ember zealots. They had known nothing but loss and hiding. They carried the bitterness of generations, stories of family lines erased, of betrayal unanswered. To them, vengeance was not a word, it was a legacy. Juno walked among them often, not as a general, but as someone who understood pain. She had lost her brother to Dominion hunters during a supply raid in her youth. Yet she held firm. "We return not to burn the stars," she told them one night as they gathered around a relic fire core, its glow reflecting in their tired eyes. "We return to remind the galaxy what we never forgot. Justice is not rage. It is memory made. Action." Some nodded, others stayed silent. A few left that gathering with fists clenched tighter than before got above them. The fleet grew. From across the exiled colonies, ships arrived patched, scarred, and beautiful in their defiance. They brought forgotten technologies, languages spoken only in hidden corners of mining worlds, and songs older than the stars themselves. Together, they formed something the galaxy had not seen in 3,000 years, a united human warfleet. It was not massive. It did not rival the Dominion in scale, but it was sharp, fast, and built from the edge of extinction. Every ship had a story, every weapon had a name, and every pilot knew what it meant to fight, not for conquest, but for a home they had never touched. As preparations neared their end, Juno stood alone on the observation deck of the Wraith, staring at the projection of Sol. It flickered in silence, a bright star at the center of a map full of scars. Earth was there, just a blue dot behind. Layers of alien defense, but it was waiting. She didn't know what they would find. The world they remembered might be lost forever, but she knew this. They were no longer just survivors. They were something new. The broken had been forged into a weapon the galaxy had forgotten. And now that weapon was aimed at home. The stars around Sol looked calm, but the silence was an illusion. Hidden in the black between planets, the fleet of exiles moved like a shadow reborn, cloaked beneath layers of quantum scatter arrays and powered by hybrid tech pulled from 100 worlds. The human ships approached their forgotten home, not with noise, but with purpose. Earth shone brightly ahead, a beautiful world of oceans and clouds, green forests and glittering cities. But it was not theirs. The Triarch Dominion had claimed it long ago. Earth was now a display piece for alien nobility, a resort wrapped in luxury and lies. Its past had been erased, its true history buried under layers of propaganda. To the rest of the galaxy, Earth was just another jewel in the Dominion's crown, peaceful, beautiful, and harmless. But the fleet knew better. They saw the chains in orbit. Dozens of defense stations and satellites circled the planet like bars around a prison. Massive orbital mirrors redirected solar energy. Drones patrolled invisible lanes and silent warning beacons blinked in alien code. Yet under all this control, the old system still breathed. And that was where humanity had its edge. Inside the Halcyon Wraith, Echo, the AI brought back from Terran ruins and rebuilt in Exile, scanned the Dominion's network from a safe distance. Deep in the code of the orbital systems, it found familiar patterns. Fragments of Terran operating systems were still running beneath the updates. Old programs hidden under new command lines. The Dominion had built on top of what humans had once made, never bothering to remove the roots. It was a mistake. Echo moved through those forgotten paths like a ghost, reactivating silent subroutines, opening access ports long assumed dead. With careful timing, it launched a single command through the old systems. Lights blinked, shields dropped, and in 1 second of confusion, the outer defenses went dark. The first strike wasn't loud, it was surgical. Human strike ships darted out, disabling power grids, blinding satellites, and cutting communication lines between Earth and its outposts. Titan's data center, the Dominion's backup archive, was disabled before the alarms even finished sounding. On Mars, a command citadel built inside the old Olympus Mons crater was infiltrated by stealth units using terrain data stored in Echo's memory maps from before the fall. No warnings reached the Central Dominion command. Every move was planned. Every second counted. And with each success, another forgotten Terran name was spoken. Not for revenge, but for remembrance. But the Dominion was not without weapons of its own. When the shock faded and the Triarch leaders realized who had returned, fear turned to fury. They unleashed their most secret creation, the Dreadbound. These were not machines or simple soldiers. They were living weapons crafted from twisted science. Centuries ago, the Dominion had harvested human DNA from captured survivors. They studied human adaptability, strength, and resistance. Now they had used it. The Dreadbound were tall, fast, and terrifying. Their minds were shaped by Dominion code, but their bodies carried the fury of human design. And now they were sent to kill the very species they had been shaped from. Juno saw them first on Europa, where a Dominion lab had turned into a battlefield. The Dreadbound moved like shadows, their eyes glowing with cold purpose. For the first time in the siege, the humans were pushed back. It wasn't just the weapons. They were fighting against a twisted reflection of themselves. But Juno was not afraid. She had seen too much to fear copies. They used what they stole, she told her commanders. But they cannot steal our will. She ordered a shift in tactics. Human units stopped engaging in direct conflict. Instead, they used distraction and sabotage. AI-guided drones turned Dominion systems against the Dreadbound. Echo flooded their command links with false signals. Reclaimed orbitals were used to scatter their units, separating them from their handlers. One by one, the Dreadbound began to fall not by brute force, but by outthinking the ones who created them. Still, the siege was not easy. Losses came quiet and sharp. Ships were damaged, pilots were injured, and the weight of returning home under fire pressed against every heart. Yet hope did not fade. In fact, it grew stronger. The people of the fleet saw Earth rising in the distance, free from illusions. They saw a planet waiting for its true guardians to return. And in that light, they found strength. Across the system, the Dominion's grip weakened. Supply lines vanished, leaders disappeared, and their fortresses cracked from within. The siege was not a storm. It was a slow and deliberate unmaking of control. The humans did not come to conquer. They came to reclaim. And with each move, they proved they were no longer the same species the Dominion had once feared. They were something more. As the Wraith entered high orbit above Earth, the Dominion finally realized what had come for them. They broadcast demands, threats, even offers to negotiate. But Juno gave no reply. She simply watched the blue planet turn below her, her eyes full of purpose. The fleet had made it. Sol was no longer lost. The silence of exile was breaking. And Earth was listening. When the first human boots touched Earth soil, after 3,000 years, time itself seemed to pause. The landing zone was too quiet for such a moment, but in the hearts of those stepping out, emotions roared like thunder. Some knelt and kissed the ground, not caring that it was unfamiliar land shaped by alien hands. Others stood frozen, staring at the sky they had only ever seen in dreams or simulations. Trees moved gently in the wind, unfamiliar species planted by the Dominion to restore the land, but the Earth still felt alive. It was not the wasteland humanity had feared. It had been healed, reshaped, grown into something beautiful. But it was not truly theirs anymore. The cities were not Terran. The names were foreign. The culture, the structure, the walls and lights, they all spoke of conquerors, not caretakers. Yet something in the wind still whispered of old roots, of memories buried deep beneath the forests and stones. El Juno stood at the edge of what was once northern Africa, now covered by the towering city of Nova Alexandria. Built over the bones of ancient Cairo, the city shined with Dominion design sleek, silver towers suspended by gravity wells, clean streets filled with imported flora, and layers of defense shields humming just above the rooftops. At the very center of the city stood the last and most powerful stronghold of the Triarch Dominion, Gravity Citadel so heavily fortified that even orbit-based strikes would fail to touch it. The Triarchs, the very same species who led the destruction of Earth long ago, had taken this place as their symbol of triumph. Here they felt untouchable. But what they didn't understand was that humanity had not returned for symbols. They had returned for truth. Before any battle began, Juno walked into the city under a flag of diplomacy, followed by a small team of diplomats, engineers, and historians. They came not with threats, but with questions. They demanded answers. Why Earth had been taken, why the truth had been buried, why the galaxy had been told that humanity was gone forever. The Dominion leaders greeted her with cold arrogance. In their eyes, Earth was already theirs. They spoke of law, of ownership, of galactic order. They mocked the idea of surrender. "You are ghosts," one Triarch said, his voice layered with artificial tone, "and this world is a monument to your end." Juno stood quietly, letting him speak. But when he finished, she simply said, "Then you've built your monument on the wrong bones." The delegation left. No more words were offered. There would be no negotiation, not because humanity had no mercy, but because the truth had already been refused. That night, under the cover of a moonless sky, the assault began. It was not a storming of gates. It was a careful, targeted operation. The Exile fleet struck the power conduits beneath the city, cutting off energy to outer defenses without harming a single civilian. Echo, the AI that had guided them across this journey, dove deep into the planetary grid, unlocking firewalls the Dominion believed were safe. Old Terran codes, buried for centuries, still waited their doors, left open by engineers who had died long ago, hoping one day someone would return. Through those paths, Echo reached the heart of the Gravity Citadel, discovering something far worse than expected. The Triarchs had prepared a fail-safe pulse weapon buried beneath the city, designed to ignite the planet's atmosphere in case of defeat. A second cleansing, worse than the first. A final message that humanity would never reclaim its home. Juno knew they had only minutes. Echo, whose mind now stretched across every network on the planet, made a choice. It sent a single message to Juno: protect what's left. Then it broke itself apart, fragmenting into the grid, taking full control of the weapon system and shutting it down forever. In doing so, it erased its own consciousness. The explosion that followed was not from the failsafe. It was from the fall of the Gravity Citadel. Without its shield systems and central core, the structure collapsed inwards, crushing the Dominion. Command with precise, controlled damage. No civilian zones were hit. No infrastructure beyond the Citadel was harmed. The rest of the city watched from rooftops and windows as the symbol of their alien rulers fell in a column of smoke and fire. The next morning, silence covered Earth. Not the silence of fear, but the kind that follows a storm when people begin to breathe again. The Exile forces moved through the cities not as invaders, but as seekers. They helped stabilize systems, provided food, removed dangerous tech, and offered the people alien and human descendants alike a choice to stay, to leave, or to rebuild. Messages were sent across the galaxy, not as threats, but as truth. Earth was no longer a prize. It was home again. Not for power, but for remembrance. Evel Juno walked alone through the ruins of the citadel, her boots stepping carefully around the shattered stone. She carried no weapon. In her hand was a small, ancient plaque salvaged from the vaults of the Wraith, engraved with a name and a date long forgotten. Earth, year 0A, after Exile. She placed it at the base of the ruin and whispered, "You waited for us." Behind her, the crew of the Wraith stood quietly, watching the sunrise over a world that had once been burned and now stood reborn. The fight was not just for victory. It was for the soul of a people who had lost everything and found a way back. Earth did not cheer. It simply stood still, as if it too was remembering. And in that stillness, after so many centuries, humanity knew one thing. They were home. The war for Earth ended not with thunder, but with silence. No fireworks marked the victory, and no songs were sung in the streets. Instead, humanity stood, still, surrounded by the ashes of what was, and the quiet promise of what could be. The Dominion was gone, their leaders either captured or scattered into the void. Yet the people who returned, descendants of the broken, the exiled, the forgotten, did not celebrate like conquerors. They walked the streets of alien cities with cautious eyes and tired hearts, not because they feared resistance, but because they understood the weight of what they had taken back. Evel Juno knew this better than anyone. Standing on the observation deck of a half-ruined tower, once named Nova Alexandria, she watched as cleanup crews moved through the city, carefully removing Dominion banners and replacing systems with hybrid human tech. But the cities themselves were not destroyed. Their walls still stood, their foundations solid. Humanity did not tear them down. Instead, they chose to reshape them, to rebuild, to integrate, and to reach out. Survivors from alien species who had lived on Earth under Dominion control were offered shelter and dialogue, not punishment. Those who had not taken part in the old genocide were given a chance to stay. And many did, some curious, others guilty, most simply tired of running. Earth, now free, became a place of strange harmony. The sharp edges of the past had not disappeared, but they were being softened by the quiet labor of peace. Monuments began to rise, not tall or proud, but thoughtful. On the cliffs of what was once Western Europe, a wall was carved with the names of lost colonies and broken fleets. In the forests of South America, a single path of stones stretched for miles, each stone marked with a memory, a captain, a ship, a song, a hope. These were not memorials to war. They were tributes to survival. A reminder that even in the coldest dark of space, something in humanity had refused to die. And it wasn't their strength, or their weapons, or their will to fight. It was their ability to remember, to build, and to hope again. Near the center of what had once been New York, on the ruins of the old Earth monument known as the UN Spire, Evel Juno climbed the final steps with steady hands. Around her, the ground was scorched and cracked, but green shoots had already started to grow between the stones. Behind her stood children born in metal corridors and deep space ships, children who had never seen rain, never touched soil. Today they stood barefoot on Earth, eyes wide with wonder. Some laughed, some cried. Most simply looked around in silence, as if waiting for the planet to speak. Juno carried a small cloth in her hand, not made of gold, not marked by war, just a simple flag bearing the old Terran insignia, a blue earth held between stars. She planted it in the soil at the top of the ruined spire. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the wind caught the fabric, and it fluttered gently, like a breath held too long, now finally released. Later that day, a survey team deep beneath the Owl planet's crust unearthed something strange. A small archive drone, long dormant, buried under layers of stone and dust. Its casing was cracked, its legs frozen, but when touched by human hands, it blinked awake. Slowly, it played a single message, encoded in Earth's oldest languages. The voice was faint, clearly human, recorded long before the fall. "If you are hearing this," it said, "then humanity has survived. And that means hope has too." The message repeated, then ended. The drone died again, this time for good. No one spoke for several minutes. The recording passed from hand to hand, copied and shared, played again in silence. It became a symbol, not just of return, but of promise. Earth had waited. And now it was no longer alone. Across the world, communities began to form. Not in the image of the old Earth, but something entirely new. Old exiles mixed with new settlers. Machines once used for war were turned to farming, to building, to art. The AI Echo, whose sacrifice had saved the planet, was honored not with a statue, but with a garden of light, a living network of trees, each wired with memories from the Yao. Ships it once guided. Juno walked those paths often, not to command, but to reflect. She knew the galaxy would watch this new Earth with suspicious eyes. She knew fear and tension still lived beyond the stars. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in thousands of years, humanity was not drifting, not hiding, not just surviving. They had come home not to reclaim what was lost, but to rebuild something better. And in the heart of this world, where sorrow and strength now stood side by side, the future waited, not empty, but full of possibility. Earth, long silenced, had found its voice again. And it spoke not of vengeance or power, but of people who chose not to become monsters, even when given every reason to. Humanity hadn't just returned. They had remembered who they were. And in doing so, they had reclaimed not just a planet, but a future worth fighting for. Let me know if you'd like the full story in one file, a Urdu translation, or if you want help turning this into a novel or script.